What an Azerbaijan Grand Prix we've just witnessed. Not really because of what we necessarily always saw in terms of the fight for the win. That was always one man's fight and one man's fight only. But we've seen some really interesting results and potentially a little bit of a shake-up when it comes to at least the World Drivers' Championship fight, if not necessarily the battle for the Constructors' Championship. Why exactly? Well, we'll delve into that as we talk about the major talking points from this particular race. And major talking point number one, Max Verstappen keeps his slim title hopes alive. Now, I know it might seem like clutching at straws, but the fact is that the deficit prior to this race was only about 90 odd points. And right now, with 7 races still to go, he's brought it down to the 70 odd point mark, which is fairly good. And if things continue evolving the way they have been for McLaren in recent times, you can anticipate that Verstappen will be there to pick up the pieces, just as he was at Baku, not only to get the pole, but then to comfortably take the race win, because he drove from start to finish and that lead never really looked like being threatened by anyone, the race win never being beyond all doubt. But one of the reasons that was the case really for Verstappen was a very crucial first lap incident that saw Oscar Piastri ruled out of the race. Well, I say it's a disaster because not only did he end up botching the start, where he jumped the queue a little bit earlier, which meant that he had to brake. By the time he got the car up and running again, he was down in dead last on the first lap and then ended up suffering what looked like a bit of a lockup and thereafter crashing into the walls, therefore taking him out of the race and ensuring that it could potentially have been a very disastrous race for him. It wasn't in the end, and why we'll get down to that was just in a bit we'll get to that. But the fact is that he would not have wanted a DNF in a circuit where previously he's won. Not only because he'd want to stave off the title race and actually stave off his teammate Lando Norris, but keep Verstappen at bay too. And speaking of Lando Norris, well, unfortunately for him, his nightmares with pit stops have continued now with 2 weekends on the trot. If you thought in Italy it was bad that his front left wheel ended up getting unstuck and unglued and leaving him for a long pit stop, this time around it was the front right wheel that took a little longer to go on, but the 2 odd seconds that it cost him in pit stop time was enough to get him out of contention for the race win. Other than that, he'd been doing a fairly good job. He'd been in the top 5 and had a very long stint on the medium tires. Once he got into the hards, he'd have plenty of tires left to actually push and get some overtakes done if he could have been within the top 5 after his pit stop. Unfortunately, the slow nature of the pit stop meant that he ended up getting caught in the midfield traffic, could only end up finishing 7th, which means that a 31-point lead which Piastri had is cut down, but only to 25 points. So really, for Piastri, it's a case of damage limitation being done in some ways due to a faulty wheel from Lando Norris. Bit unfortunate, but it is the way the cookie crumbles. And speaking of fortune, one person who you'd say fortune really favored was Carlos Sainz. He ended up sticking it in second place in qualifying, and just to show there was no fluke that Williams were running well, he ended up managing a 3rd place finish in the race, which actually is history. Not only is it his first ever podium finish for Williams, it's also the first ever podium finish that Williams have had in a full race for over 8 years. The last time incidentally also came in Baku, but it was all the way back in 2017. So Sainz, who many felt would be seeing a demotion of sorts, leaving Ferrari to join Williams, can stand vindicated that he's actually gotten a podium finish before the man who replaced him at Ferrari. Yes, Lewis Hamilton is still waiting for a maiden podium finish with Ferrari, whereas Sainz, through hook or crook, a little bit of luck, whatever it is you want to call it, has actually managed to get that with Williams. And the last talking point, not a major one, is of course the kind of race that George Russell had. Will fly under the radar a little bit, but it deserves a bit of a mention. Why? He'd been dealing with illness prior to the race, and of course he missed the media sessions which normally take place on Thursday because the team wanted him to be fully fit for the race sessions. He participated in practice, did ended up qualifying an impressive 5th, and then converted that into a 2nd place finish, which is another podium finish for him. That capped off with the fact that Kimi Antonelli, his teammate, ended up finishing 4th. Very strong weekend for Mercedes then, now back in second in the Constructors' Championship ahead of Ferrari, who could only finish 8th and 9th respectively in this particular race, with Hamilton being 8th and Leclerc being 9th. Bit unfortunate, but very eventful weekend overall in Azerbaijan, and it was a pretty fun race to watch. Also, if you're an Indian fan, you'd love the timings because it started at 4:30 p.m. IST, so good in terms of timings as well. What were your thoughts on the race? Well, you can let us know that in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, tap the bell icon, follow us also on social media. We're on Instagram, X and Facebook, and don't forget to stay tuned for more such updates from the world of sport on Sports Today.